it always begins with the look. You think she's looking at you, but she isn't. Her eyes don't fall on the man standing in front of her, they reach past him, into some imagined space, pulling out a version of you that doesn't exist yet. You feel the intensity of it, that strange warmth, that flicker that seems like admiration. But it isn't admiration. It's assessment. It's calculation. It's the gaze of someone measuring raw material, someone preparing to mold, polish, and sculpt you into the figure she has already built inside her mind. You are not being seen. You are being drafted into a role. Carl Jung spent his life studying this hidden theater of the soul. He wasn't interested in comforting illusions or feel-good advice. His work cut deep, exposing the forces inside us that act without our consent, that drive our choices and entangle our relationships. And one of his most piercing observations was this: women often do not fall in love with men as they are. They fall in love with the fantasy of men, with their own unconscious projection. They aren't even aware they're doing it. To them, the fantasy feels real. So when she chooses you, you believe you've been singled out. You believe she sees something special in you. But she's not choosing you. She's choosing the character you can play in her inner story. At first it feels flattering, intoxicating. You feel like the chosen one, the hero of her private myth. But when you stop fitting the role, the curtain doesn't close. The story doesn't end. She simply casts someone else. Jung named this hidden force the animus, the inner masculine figure that exists within every woman. When developed and integrated, the animus can be a guide toward clarity, strength, and wisdom. But when it remains undeveloped or takes control, it becomes something darker, almost tyrannical. It can drive a woman to chase men who will destroy her and dismiss men who would cherish her. It can make her argue without reason, dominate without insight, moralize without self-reflection. Jung went so far as to describe it as a form of possession. A woman under the grip of her animus may no longer act from her own conscious will, but from the invisible pull of an inner phantom that uses her voice, her choices, her desire. And men, you stumble into this without knowing. Nobody ever trained you to see the difference between being truly known and merely being desired. Nobody told you that being chosen isn't the same as being understood. You mistake her intensity for recognition. You hear her say, "You're different," and you believe it, unaware that she has whispered those words before, unaware that she's speaking not to you but to the image she has rehearsed since childhood. And then, inevitably, the illusion cracks. The fantasy can't hold forever. The mask slips, the role breaks, and suddenly you are no longer the hero, you're just another actor dismissed when the script no longer fits. What follows is confusion, humiliation, and betrayal. You ask yourself what you did wrong. But the truth is simple: you didn't fail. You only stopped being convincing in a play that was never yours to begin with. Jung insisted there is only one escape from this endless theater: individuation. The hard, lifelong journey of becoming whole within yourself. A man who individuates is no longer trapped in the projections of others, no longer desperate for approval, no longer measuring his worth by the roles he's asked to play. But this path is anything but easy. Most men never take it. They've been raised to chase validation, to compete for attention, to let women's choices define their sense of value. And as long as they do, they remain trapped, cycling through the same roles again and again, discarded each time the fantasy demands a new face. Individuation is brutal. It demands you face the parts of yourself you've buried, the weakness, the insecurity, the brokenness you'd rather ignore. It forces you to confront your shadow, to see yourself not as a polished character but as a whole man, fractured yet real. Few men choose that path. But those who do step out of the theater entirely. They stop being actors in someone else's drama and finally become the authors of their own lives. And that, Jung warned, is the only way to stop living as a projection and to start living as yourself. It begins in silence, in the way her eyes land on you. You believe you are being seen, finally recognized for who you are. But that belief is a trick, because what she sees is not you at all. She sees a possibility, a version of you that doesn't exist yet, a projection she has carried inside her long before you appeared. In her gaze there is hope, but also hunger, the hunger of someone looking not at reality, but at potential. You are not being embraced, you are being measured. You are not the destination, you are the raw material. From the very beginning, you are drafted into a role in a play you didn't know was being written. Carl Jung devoted his life to studying these hidden theaters of the human soul. He was not interested in easy comfort or inspirational slogans. His work cut deeper, revealing the unconscious forces that move us like puppets while we imagine we are in control. Among his discoveries was a truth that unsettles: women often do not fall in love with men themselves, but with the idea of men, with the fantasies they project onto them. The projection feels real, so real that even the woman herself believes in it. She is convinced she loves you, but she loves the role, the story, the character she has cast you to play. And so it feels magical at first. To be chosen, to be desired, to be told you are different. But the truth is harsher. You are not chosen for who you are, but for how well you fit the myth she carries. And when you no longer fit, the story does not end. The story goes on, only with a new actor wearing the same mask. Jung named this hidden force the animus, the inner masculine figure that lives in every woman. When it is developed and balanced, it can guide her toward strength, wisdom, and clarity. But when it is left unconscious or unchecked, it turns into a tyrant. It possesses her like a spirit, pushing her to chase men who harm her, reject those who care for her, argue without reason, dominate without compassion, and preach without accountability. She may believe she is acting freely, but in reality, she is being moved by a phantom within her, a shadow dressed as authority. And men, unprepared, fall into the trap. You confuse desire with intimacy. You think being chosen means being understood. You believe her when she whispers that you are different, never realizing she has whispered the same words before to men who also played her imagined hero. You mistake her gaze for truth, when it is only projection. And when the illusion finally collapses, you are left confused, heartbroken, humiliated. You wonder what you did wrong, when the answer is simple: you did nothing wrong. You just stopped acting convincingly in her private drama. Jung warned that there is only one way out of this cycle, and it is through individuation, the difficult, lifelong work of becoming whole within yourself. Because here is what most men never realize: you do not become a man by being chosen. You become a man by choosing yourself. Your worth is not measured by her affection. It is measured by your ability to stand alone, to carry your life without needing an audience. A man who has faced his unconscious cannot be controlled by projection. He cannot be seduced into being a puppet in someone else's play. He is no longer just an actor, he becomes the author of his own story. But most men betray themselves before they ever reach that point. They bend and twist into shapes they believe will be accepted. They call it compromise, they call it love, they call it sacrifice. But Jung called it by its true name: self-betrayal. And self-betrayal turns men into masks. They smile, they nod, they agree, they perform, until they no longer remember who they were before they put on the disguise. Women sense this instinctively. They sense it more sharply than men ever imagine. And the tragedy is that the very qualities men believe will secure love, predictability, obedience, endless availability, are the qualities that drain love away. The feminine, Jung said, is not drawn to comfort. It is drawn to risk, to the unknown, to the man who cannot be fully controlled or defined. The moment you give yourself away entirely, without boundaries, without resistance, you do not become more lovable. You become invisible, replaceable. And yet here lies the paradox: men would rather lose themselves than lose her. They would rather play a role forever than endure the silence of solitude. They fear being alone more than they fear being false. But Jung taught that until a man embraces solitude, he will never be free. Individuation demands that the false versions of you must die before you do. The masks, the roles, the compromises must burn away so that something real can emerge. It is not glamorous work. It is brutal. It is lonely. On that path you begin to see what others cannot bear to see: the masks they wear, the games they play, the illusions they cling to just to feel safe. And when you speak about what you see, they mock you. They call you cold, arrogant, too serious. But you are not the problem. You are the mirror. And people hate mirrors when the reflection shows them what they are desperate to avoid. Jung saw this everywhere. Patients terrified to face their own shadow, terrified to acknowledge the rejected parts of themselves. He wrote that the greatest danger to women is the unconscious animus, the inner masculine voice that speaks with false certainty and false superiority. A woman who refuses to face and integrate this force becomes its prisoner. She projects it outward, blaming men for the very war she refuses to fight within herself. And men, believing themselves saviors, walk willingly into the trap. You convince yourself that if you love her enough, if you prove yourself enough, if you sacrifice enough, she will finally see you for who you are. But projection does not work that way. Projection is a thief. It robs reality and replaces it with illusion. Until both men and women take responsibility for their inner worlds, they will remain trapped in the same tragedy, each blaming the other, neither realizing they are fighting shadows. And this is where the cruelest twist emerges. The woman who once saw you as her savior will one day see you as her enemy. Not because you betrayed her, not because you changed, but because you failed to keep her fantasy alive. You did not lie to her. You did not deceive her. You only disappointed the invisible figure she had created in her mind. You were never that figure to begin with. And this is why she resents you, not for your flaws, but for failing to live up to the myth she silently cast upon your shoulders. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And nowhere is that more obvious than in love. Two people come together and think they've found each other, but in reality, they've found a mirror. They're not entering as whole beings, but as carriers of shadows, old wounds from childhood, unmet needs, fears they've buried so deep they don't even notice them. They call it love, but Jung called it possession. It's as if both step onto a stage, already clutching a script written long before they met. They don't see the other clearly. They only see the part they want the other to play. For a while, the play works. She sees you as her hero, her answer, her missing piece. You feel chosen, wanted, maybe even special. But deep down there's a strange unease. You know she doesn't really see you. She sees an image, a fantasy stitched together from her hopes and projections. And the cruel truth is that you agreed to play along. Jung would say you weren't a victim, but a volunteer. You stepped into the role because it felt easier than facing your own emptiness. Easier to be her dream than to confront the silence inside yourself. This is the point where most men look away. Because here is where comfort ends and responsibility begins. Jung never offered shortcuts. He didn't teach men how to be more charming or more desirable. He offered the opposite, the lifelong struggle of self-confrontation. He demanded you sit in the silence of your own mind until the illusions begin to break apart. Until you face the voice that tells you you're nothing without her. That voice will resist. It will scream, it will plead, it will promise that you need her to survive. But Jung's work whispers a harder truth: the man who can stand without her is the man who is free. Free from projection. Free from playing roles. Free from bending himself into whatever shape he thinks will be loved. And when a man reaches that place, something changes. He doesn't become cold, he doesn't become distant. He becomes real. Rooted. Grounded. Alive in a way that cannot be faked. And strangely enough, it's when he no longer needs her that women are drawn to him most. Not because he's acting, but because he isn't. Because he stands on his own 2 feet, whole and unshakable, but in that clarity, you also begin to see something else. You see that she, too, has her own shadows to face. She must wrestle with her own inner forces, with the voice Jung called the animus, the inner masculine image that can dominate her if left unchecked. You cannot fight that battle for her. You cannot save her from herself. All you can do is walk your own path so fearlessly that you become a mirror. And most people hate the mirror, because it shows them truths they are not ready to see. They will turn away. They will call you arrogant, distant, too serious. But a rare few will look, and they will thank you. That is the difference between being loved for the role you play and being respected for the man you've become. And when you finally stop performing, something strange happens. People feel unsettled around you. They sense it, even if they can't explain it. You no longer fit into their safe categories, and that makes them uneasy. Jung warned that the man who has found himself will not be embraced by the crowd. He will be feared, misunderstood, even rejected. But the truth is not that you are cold or distant. The truth is that you have become untouchable. Nobody can buy you, nobody can shape you, nobody can manipulate you, because you see through the game. And when you see through it, the spell is broken. That is where real freedom begins. Not the freedom of running from love, but the freedom of finally standing as yourself, no longer a mask, no longer an actor, but a man who has met his own soul and lived to tell the story. The strange paradox of becoming free is that the very people who once begged for your attention, your validation, your approval, will begin to resent you when you no longer need theirs. They will call you distant, unavailable, cold, or too analytical. They will say you live too much in your head, too far from the warmth of human connection. But what they really mean, though they may not realize it themselves, is that they cannot control you anymore. You have stopped playing their game. You have stepped off the stage. You are no longer reading from the script they handed you, and without a script, they no longer know how to relate to you. Jung once said that the gods had not died, but had become diseases. What ancient cultures called divine possession, we now call neurosis. And the most common of these modern possessions is the sickness of men who cannot stand alone, who give their souls away to women and call it love. They believe they are being romantic when they whisper, "I would do anything for her," or "she is my everything." But Jung would see it for what it is, a refusal to carry one's own soul. It feels easier to hand over that unbearable weight to a woman, to let her be the carrier of meaning, hope, and purpose, so that the man himself can escape the responsibility. But no woman, no matter how loving, can carry the soul of a man who refuses to carry it himself. And when she realizes this, when the weight becomes impossible, she must drop it. When that moment comes, the man feels betrayed. He feels as though she has abandoned him. But in truth, she has freed him. For when the illusion collapses, he is forced to face the truth: the work of becoming a man was never hers to do. It was always his. That realization is brutal, and it brings him to a crossroads. One way leads to bitterness, the easy way. He can blame her, mock women, join the chorus of men who sneer and resent, who disguise their cowardice as strength. The other way is harder, lonelier, and infinitely more demanding. It is the way Jung pointed to, the way of individuation. To turn inward. To take back the soul he gave away. To become whole without needing another to complete him. This is where most falter, because here lies the most difficult truth: the woman he has been chasing, dreaming of, idolizing, is nothing more than the reflection of the part of himself he has abandoned. Until he faces that part, every relationship will be an act, every connection a bargain, every love a lie. But if he does the work, if he turns to face the darkness within, if he reclaims his soul, then the pattern breaks. He no longer needs to perform, no longer needs to chase, no longer needs to manipulate or beg. He becomes still, rooted, whole. And from that place of wholeness, something miraculous begins to happen. He no longer attracts women who are looking for a character to complete their fantasy. He begins to attract women who are seeking truth. When such a woman arrives, he will know. She will not demand a performance. She will not try to change him. She will not fall in love with an illusion of him. She will stand before him as she truly is, raw, unpolished, real. She will not look for a savior or a carrier of her soul. She has already done her work. She has faced her own shadows, burned through her illusions, integrated her own inner masculine. And so when she meets him, she sees him not as clay to be molded but as a man to be met. In that meeting, the air is different. There is no desperation, no clinging, no game. There is only truth. And this kind of truth is the rarest and most dangerous form of love. A love not born of need, but of freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to walk away, the freedom to stand side by side without masks, without illusions, without fear. But the warning is this: most men will never taste such love. They will stop too soon. They will choose the performance, the fantasy, the mask, because facing themselves feels unbearable. They will cling to the illusion because it seems safer than the silence of their own soul. Only a few endure. Only a few walk far enough down the path to be stripped bare of their false selves, to feel the loneliness and the loss, to burn away everything unreal. But for those who do, something extraordinary waits. At the end of that road, when all the illusions are gone, a man finally meets himself. And when he meets himself, women no longer serve as mirrors for his worth, no longer act as mothers or saviors or goddesses to complete him. They become what they were always meant to be: partners, equals, allies. It always begins the same way. A man thinks he's living freely, but he doesn't see the strings. He doesn't see how every smile he offers, every word he says, every move he makes is shaped by an invisible hunger to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved. He thinks love will finally make him whole. He thinks her eyes will give him back the pieces of himself he's been missing. But Carl Jung knew the truth. He knew that a man who refuses to face himself will always become a slave, not to chains of iron, but to chains of illusion, to the projections and fantasies of others. Jung didn't leave us a gentle guidebook or some simple formula for success. He left a warning carved out of decades of staring into the human soul. He warned that the man who avoids his own depths will spend his life performing. He will bend himself into the shape he thinks women want, he will play roles he was never meant to play, and he will call it love. But it is not love, it is self-betrayal. And yet, Jung didn't stop with a warning. He left us a challenge. He called it individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself. It is the path of no longer blaming women for the masks you put on to win their approval. It is the path of no longer seeking your reflection in their eyes. It is the path of refusing to wait for anyone to choose you, because you have chosen yourself. That is the moment a man steps out of illusion. That is the moment he stops being a puppet in someone else's play and becomes the author of his own story. But this path is not easy. It is not glamorous. It is lonely, terrifying, and raw. It strips you down until there is nothing left to hide behind. It demands that you burn away every false layer you've built, every mask you've worn, every cheap performance you've given. It demands that you sit in the silence of your own soul until the voices of need and fear die out, and something real begins to rise. And when that moment comes, when you finally stand rooted in your own truth, something shifts. You no longer bend to fit into someone else's fantasy. You no longer crave to be chosen. You no longer mistake attention for love. You become whole. And here's the paradox Jung saw so clearly: the man who no longer needs validation, the man who stands whole in himself, is the one who draws the deepest respect, even the deepest love. Not because he seeks it, but because he doesn't. Women may accuse him of being distant, too detached, too unromantic, but the truth is far more dangerous: he is no longer controllable. He has stepped off the stage. He has stopped reading from their script. He has become real, and reality unsettles those who live in illusion. If you felt something stir in you while hearing this, don't treat it like just another piece of content you scroll past. Jung's words were not meant to entertain, they were meant to awaken. Take this as a moment, a call, maybe even a warning. Share it with another man still trapped in the cycle, still waiting for someone else to give him what only he can give himself. Because the world doesn't change all at once, it changes one man at a time. And maybe, if you have the courage to choose yourself, the change begins with you.